Hey guys, tonight we're gliding silently through moonlit corridors in the heart of Imperial China. You're barefoot, cloaked in hush, as a palace lantern flickers just ahead. The Forbidden City is still asleep, or pretending to be, but you've been up since before the first rooster dared to yawn. And all around you, there's silk. So much silk. Silk underfoot, silk in bundles stacked taller than you, silk robes hanging like quiet ghosts on carved wooden racks. You're not here to rule. You're here to fold. Carefully. Quietly. Invisibly. This is the world of the Imperial Wardrobe, and it belongs to the eunuchs. You probably won't survive this job, not because it's dangerous exactly, but because it's demanding. The margins for error are so thin, they're practically woven into the fabric. You mislabel a ceremonial sash? That's 3 days of kneeling in apology. You sneeze on the summer robe of heaven? Hope you like inventory in the cellar. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far this little sleepy history club reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pad along the polished stone floor, robe sleeves brushing your wrists. You don't walk like a normal servant. Eunuchs are trained to glide, to make barely a whisper. The scent of dried jasmine and old cedar fills the air, mingling with the faint, cool scent of silk that's been in storage since before you were born. Tonight's task? Pre-dawn garment check. One of your 5 senior eunuchs is paranoid that a ceremonial dragon robe may have developed a mysterious crease. Again. The robe room is kept at a strictly controlled temperature. Not for any modern HVAC reason, just generations of practice and careful insulation. It's dry, dim, and smells faintly of sandalwood and camphor paste. You bow before you enter. Not to anyone in particular, just out of habit. The robes demand respect. Or at least, your continued employment does. The dragon robe itself is resting under a lacquered cover, embroidered with symbols of thunderclouds, leaping carp, and golden mountains. This is not just clothing. This is identity. Status. Divine connection. The Emperor doesn't just wear clothes. He becomes them. And it's your job to make sure every thread obeys. As you carefully lift the panel, you remember your training. Don't breathe directly on the fabric. Never lift it by the sleeves, always support from the base. One of your instructors once claimed a robe was ruined by improper aura handling. Historians still argue whether such aura instructions were superstition, bureaucratic overkill, or a clever way to scare newbies into precision. You inspect the robe's lining. Every stitch is there, perfectly aligned with the celestial compass. North stitched with turtleshell black. South lined in vermilion phoenixes. You'd be lying if you said you understood why. Your job is execution, not theology. And yet you feel the weight of it. Not the physical weight, though dragon robes are surprisingly heavy, but the symbolic one. This cloth touched the shoulders of heaven's sun. It sways through ceremonies that decide crops, marriages, wars. Somewhere in here, there's a small stitched crane near the inner collar. Only eunuchs see it. It's said to represent the watchers, those who serve silently and are seen by no one. That's you? The crane. Perched in shadows. Never flapping. Just folding. As dawn bleeds softly through the lattice windows, a tiny bell rings somewhere deeper in the palace. Morning has officially begun. That means robe prep, scent selection, and the great button debate, bone toggle or gold clasp. You're not senior enough to weigh in, but you still have opinions. Everyone does. The daily rotation of garments depends on the weather, the calendar, astrological readings, and whatever mood the Emperor woke up in. Your job isn't to decide, it's to make sure everything is ready. That means inspecting hundreds of robe accessories, jade clasps, silk sashes, phoenix embroidered belts, each labeled, catalogued, and stored in neat little drawers made of rosewood and gilt. You open a drawer. Lavender sachets. Another. Cinnamon ribbon ties. Another. Ah, the dreaded goose-down shoulder pads. reserved for cold season rituals and awkward diplomatic visits. You load the robe accessories tray with steady hands. Not too fast. Not too slow. An older eunuch once told you, "Speed brings error. Error brings silence." You assumed he meant punishment, but sometimes it sounds vaguely existential. As you shuffle back toward the emperor's dressing suite, you pass two other eunuchs returning from the incense hall. One of them gives you a barely perceptible nod. In this job, that's basically a high five. The suite awaits. And the emperor, still in his inner sleeping robe, will soon demand to be turned into a living painting. You've got about 15 minutes. Time to make sure nothing wrinkles, nothing shifts, and nothing, absolutely nothing, goes missing. You place the tray down. Check the belt's jade weight. Adjust the robe's collar fold. The dragon eyes must look slightly outward, never directly up. Too aggressive. There are rules. Always rules. And just before the next bell rings, you pause to admire the embroidery. 1,000 tiny stitches. Gold-threaded clouds curling around crimson suns. The tiniest, faintest detail, just under the right sleeve hem, is a green mountain goat with a flute. You don't know why it's there. No one does. One of those imperial Easter eggs, maybe. Or maybe a bored embroiderer had a sense of humor. Historians still argue whether these odd animal motifs carried hidden meanings, or were just early cases of creative rebellion. You smile to yourself. Then you check the fold again. Just to be safe. You weren't born into silk. No one is, really. You were born somewhere quieter, smaller, a village near the southern riverbanks, maybe. One with ducks and smoke from cooking fires, and neighbors who argued like they cared too much. Your earliest memories are probably of warm porridge, wooden sandals, and the faint ache of being ordinary. Then, the rumors started. A recruiter had passed through. Someone in the village whispered that the palace was looking again. Boys. Young ones. No fathers. No prospects. Just quiet enough, clever enough, maybe unlucky enough. Eunuchs. No one told you what it really meant. Not at first. They said, a better life, a way to serve the emperor, good rice every day. But you remember your mother crying behind a curtain. You remember how your uncle stopped looking you in the eye. And you remember the long, silent boat ride north, with 3 other boys who tried not to ask questions. There's no gentle way to explain what happened next. The operation. The qualification. The transition from peasant child to servant in training. It's never described in full, not even by those who've lived it. Some say it happened under poppy sedation. Others remember the smell of copper and lotus oil. Most just choose not to remember at all. Historians still argue whether eunuch recruitment was voluntary, semi-voluntary, or something more like conscription in nice clothes. Records contradict each other. Some claim grateful families offered boys up as an honor. Others hint at debt, coercion, or subtle forms of poverty-driven trafficking. Either way, you ended up in training. Your first day in the palace school was less. Grand imperial welcome, and more. Stand there until someone yells less. You were given linen trousers, stiff slippers, and a tiny scroll of expectations. There were a lot of expectations. Speech minimal. Posture perfect. Blinking too much, suspicious. But they didn't throw you straight into the wardrobe wing. No, first you had to earn your way through layers of utterly forgettable tasks. Scrubbing lacquer screens with mulberry water. Fetching oil lamps at exactly shoulder height. Whisper counting towel cracks for memorization exercises. Eventually, someone noticed you folded your cloths better than average. Maybe you aligned a seam a little too perfectly. Or maybe you didn't cry when they made you start over for the 5th time. Whatever it was, they nudged you toward textile duty. And that's when the strange beauty began. Your first glimpse of the actual imperial robe room was under supervision, of course. You remember the sound first, not silence exactly, but that soft layering of fabric against wood, the gentle breath of cedar oil, the creak of lacquered hinges. It was like entering a temple that didn't want you to pray, just organize the altar cloths. The head eunuch back then, Master Jin had one good eye and a voice like someone constantly swallowing tea too fast. He didn't look at you when he said, "Some threads are finer than trust. Don't snap either." You took that personally. He showed you how to hold silk with the backs of your fingers. How to slide one palm beneath a folded collar like you were comforting a bird. How to press a crease not with heat, but with sanded jade. And slowly, the robe room became less terrifying and more tender. You learned that emperor's robes were categorized not just by occasion but by tone. A mildly auspicious banquet had different embroidery rules than a strongly auspicious parade. Colors couldn't be repeated 2 days in a row, unless Mercury retrograde was in effect. They didn't call it that, but the court astrologer's mood could derail your entire week. Your own robe, if you could call it that, was plain gray, unadorned, and always slightly too short. Eunuchs weren't meant to stand out. Which suited you fine. You didn't need gold thread. You had access to it. That's when the testing began. Master Jin once laid out 3 identical-looking robes and asked you to pick the spring solstice one. You panicked, then noticed a barely visible pattern of bamboo shoots in the hem. Spring. Of course. Another time, he tied all the robe belts into one massive, writhing silk knot and told you to unbind it without creasing a single thread. It took you 2 hours. He said nothing. Later, you found an extra chestnut bun in your dinner tray. Praise. You started to understand that this wasn't just laundry. This was power, folded and perfumed. This was how the emperor presented himself to the world. And only a handful of people like you, got to shape that image every day. One evening, as you were inventorying phoenix pins, a newer recruit whispered, "Do you ever want to leave?" You shrugged. "Where would I go?" He didn't answer. He never came back after that week. Transferred. Demoted. Vanished. Who knows? That's when you really understood the job. It wasn't just about robes. It was about permanence. The garments might change, the seasons might cycle, but the wardrobe eunuch remains. Always careful. Always silent. Always there. And maybe, just maybe, a little proud. Not that you'd ever say it out loud. Not that anyone would ask. The first time you helped dress the emperor, your hands are shaking. Not visibly, of course. You've practiced for this. 10,000 mock folds, endless runs through the dressing sequence, even silent drills with a slightly annoyed wax figure wearing the spring feast robe. But no amount of practice prepares you for the real thing. The inner dressing room smells like warm resin and imperial soap. 2 other eunuchs stand beside you, each focused on their part of the ritual. One handles the underrobe. One prepares the ornamental belt. Your task is the sleeves. Simple in theory. Crucial in practice. One misplaced cuff, one twisted lining, and you've created a public wrinkle on the mandate of heaven itself. The emperor says nothing as you approach. He's younger than you expected. Barefoot. Staring blankly ahead while attendants comb his hair and an astrologer mumbles something about wind direction. His expression says, "Bored to death," in 10 different dialects. You bow. You step in. You lift the sleeve. It glides on like water over stone. This is a robe made of silk so fine it nearly breathes. It carries embroidered clouds, dozens of them, each representing a different realm under heaven's domain. You smooth the fabric over his shoulder without a sound. No tugging. No fuss. And then, he nods. Barely. A flick of acknowledgement. You step back, heart pounding, but face calm. You don't even blink until he's halfway down the corridor, trailed by an entourage of scribes, guards, and a surprisingly athletic-looking goat meant for a springtime blessing ceremony. Later, back in the robe room, Master Jin passes by your station. He doesn't stop, but he taps your folded inventory scroll twice with a finger. That's a compliment, in robe language. Over the weeks, you become part of the routine. Dawn inspections. Seasonal rotations. Special requests from imperial concubines wanting their favorite robes scented with lychee or star anise. Once, a visiting envoy from Korea sent a silk tunic as a gift, and you were tasked with integrating it into the rotation without insulting anyone's ancestral lineage. You nearly had a nosebleed from the stress. But you did it. Some days the work is meditative. You fold, you catalog, you repair a fraying thread here and there with golden silk as fine as baby hair. Other days, it's sheer chaos. Like the time someone spilled ceremonial rice wine on the emperor's autumn robe 30 minutes before a ritual involving 8 drums and a red deer. You and 3 others spent 15 minutes fanning the stain, while a 4th distracted the emperor by complimenting his earlobes. Or the infamous brocade incident, when the Empress Dowager received a robe embroidered with precisely 1 too many phoenixes. Apparently, 9 is imperial. 10 is divine. And that's just presumptuous. Historians still argue whether these tiny robe details were genuine political landmines or just the result of centuries of silk-based bureaucracy eating its own tail. You personally think it's both. You start to learn the secret code of the wardrobe. Not just what robe means what, but who prefers which texture. The emperor likes his inner robe slightly chilled in summer. One of the princesses prefers thicker hems, so she can hide notes. A senior minister insists on sunset orange for any negotiation days. You suspect it's a power color. One afternoon, you're entrusted with a robe that hasn't seen daylight in 15 years. It's part of the deep archive, which is basically the robe crypt. Inside, you find a ceremonial hunting tunic embroidered with horses that look like they're telling inside jokes. It's stiff, heavy, and smells like regret and camphor. Still, you air it gently. Brush off the dust with a feather wand. Fold it back with reverence. No one else saw you do it. But the robes saw. That counts for something. Over time, the hierarchy of the robe room becomes more than titles. It becomes choreography. Master Jin oversees the flow, but each of you knows your step. There's old Ping, who specializes in sashes and laughs like a hiccup. Soft voice Li, who hums while folding and has folded the exact same robe every Wednesday for 30 years. And Mei, who doesn't speak much but can sense a wrinkled collar from 6 paces. You're still one of the newer ones, but your place is solidifying. There's something soothing about it. Predictable. The chaos of palace life happens elsewhere. Ministers bicker, concubines scheme, generals posture. But in the robe room, there is only silk, order, and the endless folding of the fabric of power. You've even started keeping a private log, not official, just for yourself. Notes about interesting embroidery patterns. Weird robe requests. One entry reads, Emperor requested less itchy belt. Replaced jade clasp with polished wood. He smiled. Small miracle. You keep that 1 starred. Your days stretch into seasons. You mark time not by holidays, but by fabric weight. Light silks for spring, airy robes for summer, layered brocade for autumn, and thick, padded dragons for winter. The palace becomes a cycle of textures. And somewhere in that cycle, you begin to feel still. Not happy exactly. Not sad. Just still. And sometimes, when folding a moonlight-colored festival robe, you let your fingers linger on the embroidered waves just a moment longer. You imagine sailing across them, riding out of the palace on a sea of silk. You imagine freedom. Then you hear the bell. Time for inspection. And you fold the thought away, as neatly as any robe. Sometimes, the robe room gets visitors. Not the kind you expect. No nobles sweeping in with demands or princesses flinging their sashes at your head. No, these are quiet visits. Subtle. Strategic. Courtiers with thin smiles and deep sleeves. They pretend not to notice you. You pretend not to overhear them murmuring to Master Jin. Something about next month's festival. Something about a shift in the emperor's wardrobe tone. Something about favor. Favor. That weightless word that could anchor or sink 1,000 careers. That's when you begin to understand something odd. Robes aren't just robes. They're code. They're messages wrapped in cloud motifs and crane embroidery. They're diplomacy, politics, family drama, all stitched in gold thread. Take, for instance, the pearl collar incident. It began with a robe request from the emperor's youngest brother, Prince Liu. He wanted something dignified but modest. Fine. Reasonable. But the specifications were strange: gray silk, silver thread, and, most curiously, a collar inlaid with freshwater pearls. A subtle detail, unless you knew the code. Pearls on a collar? That's usually reserved for direct heirs or senior consorts. Not little brothers with a gambling problem and a deeply forgettable poetry collection. Historians still argue whether the prince was making a power move or just had terrible taste. But in the robe room, you didn't have time for theories. You had to make the thing. You helped stitch those pearls, one by one, your fingers aching, your breath shallow. You polished each one with rice paste and a goat-hair brush until they gleamed like tiny moons. When Prince Lu wore it to the moon festival, palace gossip detonated like firecrackers. Later, Master Jin told you to, accidentally, misplace the robe in storage for a few weeks. You wrapped it in 2 layers of mulberry paper, tucked it beneath a crate of mourning sashes, and made very sure no one could find it until the rumors died down. That's how it works in the robe room. You're not just folding. You're managing dynastic temperature. Of course, not all intrigue involves pearls and politics. Sometimes, it's just fashion. Like the time a concubine from the western provinces requested a robe dyed with imported indigo and decorated with pomegranates. Entire pomegranates. Not abstract motifs, realistic ones, bursting open in full fruity glory. You spent days with the embroidery scroll, trying to make the fruit look elegant instead of aggressively juicy. In the end, it worked. She wore it once, declared it auspiciously fertile, and then promptly sent it to the archives because it reminded her of her aunt. Not every robe gets to be a legend. Still, you document each one. Your little personal scroll of robe lore has grown longer. You've started giving them secret names. Whispers of Peach. Wrath of the Plum Blossom. The one that smelled like shrimp for no clear reason. One night you stay late. Not for punishment. Just curiosity. You want to examine the emperor's coronation robe. It's never worn, only preserved, wrapped in layers of moth-proof silk, resting in a jade-lined chest under a locking spell you pretend not to understand. You unroll it slowly, reverently. The fabric catches candlelight like water. Golden dragons, 5 of them, coil through waves and clouds, each claw extended in a dance that might mean triumph or defiance. Historians debate that part endlessly. Some say the 5th claw, always half visible, was a symbol of divine restraint. Others think it was just hard to embroider, and the artisan gave up halfway. You stare at it until your eyes blur. Then you fold it again, whispering an apology for waking it. There's a story one of the older eunuchs likes to tell. About a robe so beautiful, it drove an empress to tears. She had it destroyed because no one, not even her, should outshine the sun. You don't know if that's true. But you like it. You think about it as you prepare the emperor's robe for the winter solstice feast. It's a new one, designed that year with frost cranes and midnight blue silk. You're responsible for the final press. You breathe in. Out. Slide your jade smoothing wand over the collar. And there, near the left cuff, you spot a tiny misthread. One single crane has its beak bent the wrong way. No one else would notice. Not even the emperor. But you do. And so, carefully, silently, you unpick the thread, restitch the curve, and realign the grain. It takes you half the night. But in the morning, that crane flies straight again. No one says thank you. But Master Jin stops by your station with a cup of warm ginger water. He says nothing. Just places it down and walks away. You smile. And you fold on. There comes a time when you stop seeing robes as garments, and start seeing them as stories. Stories folded into layers, whispered in thread, carried on the backs of the empire's most silent machinery. Today, you're working on travel robes. Not glamorous. Not ceremonial. But incredibly important. These are the garments worn when the emperor tours the provinces, times when appearances must walk a tightrope between humility and power. Travel robes must be comfortable enough for bumpy palanquins, but still impressive enough to cause local magistrates to nearly faint from flattery. You run your fingers across a lightweight wool linen blend meant for cooler climates. It's dyed a gentle walnut brown, the kind of tone that says, "I'm not trying to intimidate you, but yes, I can execute your entire family." The lining, though, is bright saffron, hidden unless the emperor lifts his arm. That flash of color? Pure imperial mischief. Historians still argue whether this color choice was an accident of fading dyes or a coded nod to Buddhist influence. You've asked Masterjan about it once, and he only replied, "Even the lining has politics, boy." You're learning that the road is where robes face their biggest trials, not court intrigue or jealous ministers, but dust, rain, and the occasional peasant goat with no respect for silk. Travel robes are heavily reinforced. Hidden stitches crisscross their hems like secret armor. The sleeves have slightly more give, the collars slightly looser, all for the sake of functionality disguised as elegance. And because the robes travel farther than most of their wearers ever will, they pick up memories. You open the garment log and trace your finger down the margin notes. One robe returned from the mountains of Sichuan with pine needles tucked into the folds. Another came back from a river crossing in the south reeking of fish for 3 days. You pressed that one 6 times. Still smelled like guilt. One robe, your favorite, came back with a loose thread and a smudge of orange clay. You didn't clean it. Just folded it gently and wrote, "Returned with honor. Do not touch." The robe room is quieter during travel season. Most of the big pieces are on the road. The remaining robes sit like sleeping cats, coiled in their cubbyholes, waiting for festival season. You take advantage of the lull to explore. There's a small back room with a collection of failed robes, projects that never made it to full use. Some are too experimental, a robe with metallic thread that buzzed when touched, some politically awkward, the dragon with 7 claws incident, and some just too fragile to wear. But they're beautiful. Strange and beautiful. You pull out one embroidered with cypress trees and a strange little pagoda design that no one seems to recognize. A label attached reads simply, "Draft 4. Not approved." You imagine the artisan who designed it, pouring heart and soul into this little vision, only for it to be rejected with a shrug. You whisper, "I approve," and you fold it back with extra care. There's another robe, unfinished, its threads loose like frayed thoughts. You run your hand over the design. It's a map. Or maybe a dream of a map. Mountains stitched too close together, rivers that loop in impossible shapes. One village marked with a tiny red thread. You want to go there. Wherever that thread points. Of course, you're not going anywhere. Except maybe down the corridor to the incense room. You've been experimenting with scents. Robes stored with a touch of sandalwood seem to press better. Jasmine works well for robes meant for summer wear. One time you tried clove, and Masterjan nearly choked. Not everything is a hit. One quiet afternoon, a younger eunuch approaches you. New to the palace, still wide-eyed, still walking too loudly. He asks you how to tell if a robe is inside out. You show him the hidden stitching, the fold lines, the difference in how silk reflects light depending on its weave. He stares at you like you're magic. You smile. You were him, once. That night, the Emperor returns from a trip to the southern marshlands. You're tasked with receiving the travel robes. They arrive in sealed cedar trunks, each labeled by day, occasion, and weather. You open one. It smells of lotus. Another smells like ash. You blink, then double-check the log. Village festival. Incense fire. No injuries. Just a moment, a breath of chaos woven into fabric. You inventory everything. Press what needs pressing. Clean what can be cleaned. And you archive the rest with a strange tenderness. These robes have seen things. As you place the final robe back into its storage slot, you pause. You press your hand to the fabric. "Welcome back," you whisper. No one hears you. Except maybe the robe. You wake to rain. Not the sharp kind that lashes windows or drums on rooftops. This is palace rain, gentle, persistent, and slightly theatrical. It slicks the eaves and deepens the red lacquer of every corridor. The robe room, nestled beneath a tiled pavilion, glows with the sort of quiet only 1,000 years of embroidery can summon. Today, you have a new assignment, preparation for the Mid-Autumn Banquet. You've done this before, many times, but each year, the expectations shift like moonlight. This year's theme? Harmony in motion. Which, as usual, sounds poetic but means absolutely nothing in terms of hem length or sleeve width. Still, robes must be made. The emperor will need 2 changes, one for the formal court gathering, another for the private moon viewing in the Eastern Garden. His consorts will wear shades of plum and silver. Ministers will don stiff brocade and cloud motif weaves. You'll work in the background, fingers ink-stained from silk stencils and mulberry paste measurements. You begin with fabric selection. There's a bolt of deep charcoal silk that shimmers with the faintest sheen of purple. You unfurl it carefully, savoring the sound it makes, like a sigh held for centuries. This, you decide, will be the base for the moon-viewing robe. It looks like the sky before stars arrive. You mark it with chalk, using an ironwood ruler that has seen 5 dynasties. You whisper to yourself as you work, not words, exactly, just little reassurances. The fabric responds. The room seems to lean in closer. You embroider waves, not crashing, but soft ripples that mimic the reflection of lanterns on water. Each stitch is small, gentle, invisible from a distance, like most palace truths. Historians still debate whether this style of wave motif came from an ancient seafaring clan or was invented by a drunken court poet who liked ripples in his wine. You're inclined to believe both. As you stitch, you remember last year's mid-autumn chaos, when one minister fainted from heat stroke and landed headfirst into a dish of candied taro. His robe had to be replaced mid-banquet. You were the one who fetched the spare, running barefoot across slippery stone tiles with the dignity of a startled duck. This year you prepare duplicates in advance. You also prepare the emperor's robe accessories. The sash, embroidered with pale cranes. The undershirt, dyed with indigo and scented with crushed tea leaves. And the ceremonial fan, painted with a single plum blossom and tied with silk cords the exact color of peach skin at dawn. You fold each element with the precision of ritual. Not because anyone will thank you, but because that's what the robe deserves. In the afternoon, Master Jin calls you over. He's holding an older robe, cream-colored, soft-edged, clearly worn. It's from a former empress, long past, pulled from the archives by special request. The emperor wants it displayed near the ancestral shrine during the banquet. A quiet gesture, a private grief. You take it in your hands. It smells faintly of camphor and osmanthus. The embroidery, peonies in a spiral of gold, is still intact, though faded at the edges. You spend hours gently steaming the creases out, pressing the folds with your jade wand. You don't speak during this process. You hardly breathe. When you're done, the robe lies before you like a memory smoothed into silk. You think of the Empress. You never met her, but you've heard stories. Clever. Serene. Once whispered the phrase. A calm robe conceals a storm. After a minister accused her of indifference. You like her already. That night you work by candlelight. The palace glows with lanterns. Distant music rises from the banquet halls. You aren't invited. You never are. But the robes you've prepared are there, dancing, gliding, sitting silently beneath plum trees while mooncakes are passed and wine cups clink. One robe, perhaps, catches the moonlight in just the right way, and a courtier turns to another and says, "Now that's taste." You smile. You're part of the evening, even if no one sees your face. You finish the last fold, brush the dust from your lap, and stretch your fingers. Rain still falls, gentle as ever. And somewhere out there, the Emperor watches the moon in the robe you made, wondering, perhaps briefly, why it feels so strangely comforting. He doesn't know it's because you lined it with a layer of silk from a springtime bolt. One that smelled faintly of honeysuckle. A quiet touch. A secret gift. The robe knows. And you do too. The palace wakes slow the morning after a banquet. Courtyards are strewn with the leftovers of refinement, dropped fans, melted candles, the occasional half-eaten mooncake nibbled by an opportunistic palace cat. You, of course, are already up, already folding. Today is laundry day. Not your laundry, no? That would be too simple. Today, you're inspecting and sorting the robes that were worn during last night's grand mid-autumn feast, which have been returned in a state of elegant disarray. There's a certain ritual to this part. The couriers arrive, bow, and set down the cedar boxes. You unfasten each clasp like you're opening a tomb, and what you find inside is often revealing. The Emperor's moon-viewing robe? Slight wine stain near the hem. You smile. He must have sat near the garden koi pond again, the one where they serve plum wine in cups that look like little lotus petals. A dangerous mix of beauty and slipperiness. It happens. One consort's robe comes back with a patch of crushed marigold petals caught in the sleeve. Another smells faintly of candied ginger. One minister's stiff ceremonial sash is twisted like he made several attempts to loosen it, then gave up. You imagine him wheezing through the final poem recitation of the night. You pull out your steaming stones and get to work. There's a fine art to pressing imperial robes. The goal is to make them look unworn, like they floated off a cloud and draped themselves perfectly into shape. You lay each one flat on the long cedar table, mist the fabric with water steeped in jasmine and mugwort, and press lightly with the heated jade wand. One wrong move, and the silk puckers. One breath too heavy, and you leave a mark. You've learned to hold your body like you're not entirely there. Like you're part ghost. Midway through a sleeve you pause. There's a thread out of place, barely visible, like a single strand of gray and black hair. You pick it loose and tug gently. Something slips. A hidden seam? A pocket? You tug again and discover a secret, a small, folded note tucked between the layers of the Emperor's inner lining. Your heart stutters. You shouldn't read it. You know that. But you do. It's a poem. No name. No signature. Just a few careful lines about the moon, longing, and a peach tree that never bore fruit. You swallow and fold it back. Press it deeper into the lining. Let it stay. Historians still argue whether emperors ever truly fell in love, or if love, in their case, was just a performance stitched into the performance of rulership. You've decided it doesn't matter. Someone wrote that poem, and someone wore it close to their skin. You move on. The rest of the morning passes with a rhythm all its own: steam, smooth, fold, stack. You hum as you work, an old lullaby your mother used to sing before you were sent here. You barely remember her face, but the song has never left. Master Jean appears around noon with a task. Sort the retirement robes, he says, and walks off with the urgency of a man late for tea. You sigh. Retirement robes are symbolic garments gifted to aging officials who've served honorably and are being dismissed to their family estates. They're embroidered with themes of longevity, cranes, pine trees, peaches, and tend to be heavily optimistic. One features a giant tortoise carrying a plum tree on its back. You stare at it, unsure whether to laugh or bow. These robes are less about comfort and more about messaging. You may leave, but the court will always loom over your shoulder. You fold each one with care. Somewhere, an old man is going to wear this and try to pretend he's not crying into his ceremonial wine. That deserves softness. As you fold the last retirement robe, a strange thought hits you. What will your robe be one day? You won't retire. Eunuchs rarely do. There's no villa in the countryside waiting for you. No orchard. No grandchildren. You look down at your own uniform robe, plain, functional, faded at the cuffs. You run a hand along the sleeve. Maybe this is your retirement robe. The one you wear every day, a little thinner each year. You get up, stretch your back, and feel every year you've been here settle into your spine like the folds of a scroll. That evening, as you sweep the robe room, a tiny breeze rustles the fabric of the stored gowns. You pause and look back. Just for a moment, the sleeves all seem to move at once, like hands waving goodbye, or hello. You're not sure. You smile. You close the storage doors. And you walk home under the soft, persistent fall of rain. The morning sun spills over the courtyard, soft and golden, the kind that only arrives after a stretch of rain. The air is thick with the scent of damp stone and green shoots, the kind of air that makes your lungs feel like they've been recharged by the earth itself. You're in the robe room, of course. Where else would you be? The silk and brocade are alive with light, and the early calm settles into your bones. But today, there's something different. The palace feels heavier, quieter. There's a whisper in the halls, rumors about a special royal visit, an emperor from another province. One who likes to challenge the boundaries of court fashion. His reputation precedes him, sharp, bright, and prone to demanding new things that are never easy to make. Today, you're preparing for a surprise. Master Jin calls you over, his voice low and deliberate. He's standing in front of a large trunk, one that's been sealed tight with wax. You know this trunk well. It's where the rarest, most extravagant garments are stored, the robes that can't be touched unless an emperor himself orders it. Today, you'll be the one to break the seal. Jin looks you over with a thoughtful expression, as if he's about to share some ancient secret. I want you to work on this, he says, opening the trunk to reveal a bolt of fabric that catches the light in a way that makes you pause. It's not silk, but something softer, something you haven't seen in years. A fabric that feels like liquid air. Gold thread runs through it like veins, shimmering with faint, ethereal patterns that you can't quite make out. What is this? You ask, unable to keep the curiosity from your voice. It's from the far west, he replies, tapping the fabric gently with his finger. A gift, or perhaps a challenge. The emperor of that region has requested something that will leave an impression. The robe must be. He doesn't finish the sentence. You already understand. The robe is meant to be new. Not just in its style but in its very essence. A marriage of tradition and something foreign, something fresh. The emperor wants to make a statement, something that says, I am not just ruler of this land. I am ruler of all lands. You run your fingers through the fabric. The gold thread catches your skin, almost like it's alive. It feels cool to the touch, but also warm in an unsettling way, as though the fabric has absorbed centuries of secrets. You're tasked with designing the robe in a way that will honor both cultures, the emperors and the foreign rulers. This isn't just embroidery, this is a blending of worlds. You get to work immediately. The first challenge is figuring out how to make this fabric feel regal. It's a delicate balance. Too much gold, and it becomes gaudy. Too little, and it risks losing its otherworldly allure. You start with a simple, symmetrical design, intertwining vines and stars, motifs from ancient Chinese scrolls that evoke both nature and celestial order. But something feels off. You stare at the fabric, wondering if you're trying too hard to force something foreign into an emperor's vision. Then it hits you, the gold thread isn't just ornamental. It's a language. You begin to weave it into delicate, abstract patterns. A celestial map? A river flowing in the shape of a dragon's spine? The possibilities start to bloom in your mind, and with each stitch, you feel as though you're connecting to something larger than yourself. As the hours pass, you lose track of time. The palace grows quiet around you. The weight of tradition, of empire, falls away, and all that remains is this robe. Its breath. Its pulse. Historians still argue whether the emperor's obsession with foreign designs was a symbol of openness or of insecurity. Some say he was trying to show the world that China was the center of everything. Others claim it was a way to demonstrate strength by inviting diversity. You don't care about that now. You care about the threads. The way they glide through your fingers. The way they speak a language only you understand. By the time the sun has set, the robe is nearly done. You can't wait to show it to Master Jin, but you also know you'll have to wait. The emperor is not someone who takes kindly to the hurried work of his artisans. He expects precision, even when it comes to something as delicate as a woven dream. You close the trunk, taking one last look at the fabric before locking it away. It's quiet here, but the weight of what you've just created follows you out of the room. You feel like a messenger, carrying something ancient and unknown in your hands, a secret that will soon be worn by the emperor himself. And somehow, that feels more powerful than anything you've ever done before. The days stretch long into a quiet, uneventful rhythm after you finish the emperor's robe. The whole palace seems to have exhaled, settling back into the same familiar patterns. The sound of footsteps echoing off marble floors, the soft clink of jade ornaments being adjusted, the rustle of silk on distant breezes. You spend your time now on smaller projects, repairing seams, reapplying embroidery, and gathering fabrics. Sometimes you find yourself lost in the rhythmic flow of it all, in the precision of your work, where time seems to fold in on itself, and each task, no matter how small, feels like a meditation. But today, there's a change. A shift in the air. A messenger arrives with word that the emperor has called for you. You're not entirely surprised. The robe has been completed and it's time for approval. You prepare yourself as best you can, though you know there's nothing you can do now to alter what's been stitched, folded, and sewn. All you can do is show the work, as it is. A small part of you hopes he'll be pleased. You walk through the long corridors, the floor cool beneath your feet. The palace is still, save for the sounds of servants going about their tasks, preparing the kitchen, adjusting banners, polishing lacquered furniture. It's as though the world is holding its breath. At last, you reach the emperor's chambers. You're escorted inside by a quiet, dignified guard. The emperor is standing by the window, his back to you. He is looking out over the sprawling garden, as he often does, his gaze distant and contemplative. The sunlight catches the edges of his robes, the gold thread flashing just a little. There's something unsettling about the silence between you, the weight of his presence filling the room. You can hear the faint rustle of the robe you've worked on, laid neatly on a nearby table. You wait. Finally, he turns, his expression unreadable. "You've been busy," he says. It's not a question. It's an observation. He strides toward the table, his eyes scanning the robe you've made. The moment stretches, but he doesn't touch it yet. Instead, his eyes flick to you, then back to the fabric. "You've woven something unique," he says slowly, as if testing the words in his mouth. "It speaks to the harmony of cultures. But also—" his voice trails off. You try to stay composed, your hands steady at your sides. "Is it to your liking?" you ask, though you already know his answer. He is rarely satisfied with anything less than perfection. He examines the robe with the scrutiny of someone who knows every seam of every garment ever worn in the palace. The gold thread reflects in the light like distant stars, casting a soft glow onto the emperor's solemn face. Finally, he reaches out, brushing his fingers along the fabric. "I believe," he begins, his voice quieter now, "this robe will leave its mark. Its beauty is subtle, but its strength is undeniable." You exhale without realizing you've been holding your breath. He doesn't smile. He doesn't need to. The quiet approval in his voice is all you need. "I'm pleased," he says simply. And in that moment you feel a rush of something strange, relief, pride, and perhaps a touch of fear. Because once this robe is worn, it will be remembered for ages. And yet you feel like it's not just his robe now. It's yours too. Your hands, your thread, your vision, woven into every inch. He steps back, eyes lingering on the robe one last time. "This will be worn at the next Imperial Council," he announces. "It is important that it remains pristine. Keep it safe, as you have done with all things. You may go." You bow low, your heart still pounding in your chest. When you leave the Emperor's chambers, the world feels a little more real, a little more heavy. The robe will be displayed, admired, and remembered by many. It will enter the ranks of imperial history, a work of art shaped by your hands. But for you, it's already more than just a garment. It's a testament. A quiet symbol of everything you've quietly made, everything you've built, woven thread by thread, day by day. You leave the Emperor's chambers and head back to the robe room, where the rest of the work waits. You're not finished yet, of course. There's always another robe to stitch, another gown to mend, another life quietly unfolding beneath your needle. Historians still argue whether those who work behind the scenes of an empire, whether the seamstresses, the cooks, the gardeners, can truly call themselves a part of the empire's legacy. You, of course, think they can. And when you press your hands into the cool silk of the robe you've made, you know you are. The weeks pass quietly, and the robe's debut approaches like a cloud gathering at the horizon. You know what's coming, and yet, it still feels like a dream. The Emperor's council, the high officials, the guests, soon, they'll all lay eyes on your work. It's a moment you'll never forget. But what you don't know is how the robe will feel when it's worn by the Emperor, how it will look draped on his form as he steps into the spotlight. In the meantime, you return to your routine. The robe room is still as steady and constant as it has always been. The soft clink of scissors against thread. The rustling of silk. The delicate, careful stitchwork that fills the space with quiet purpose. But there's something else, a hum of anticipation. You feel it in your bones, but it hasn't fully taken shape in your mind. And then one morning, the messenger arrives again, breathless and hurried, a scroll clutched tightly in his hands. You don't know what's coming, but you can see it in his eyes. There's news. Prepare yourself, the messenger says, his voice low. The Emperor has decided to wear the robe tonight, at the great banquet of the imperial court. Your heart skips. The robes you've made, the ones that have quietly hung in the corners of this room for years, are about to be showcased under the grand chandeliers of the Emperor's banquet hall. All the food, all the music, the grand tapestries, none of it matters as much as the Emperor's robe. You can already imagine it, the gold thread shimmering beneath the light, the intricate stitching like the veins of a dragon's wing. The evening arrives with the slow, steady build-up of sound, footsteps, the soft murmur of voices, the clink of dishes being prepared, and the laughter of courtiers who are unaware of the quiet artistry that's gone into this moment. You dress the robe carefully, reverently. It's an act of love, an act of quiet defiance against the passage of time. Everything you do, from the placement of each silk fold to the delicate lining, feels like an offering. The robe is finally revealed to the Emperor, and you watch him stand in front of the mirror, the soft, golden glow of the fabric enveloping him. You see it, the weight of centuries in that fabric, the work of 1,000 hands. Yours. Historians still argue whether the Emperor was a true master of style, or whether he simply wore whatever was offered to him. Some believe he knew what was beautiful, others think he relied on the artisans who surrounded him to craft his image. The truth, however, is simple. The Emperor wore what he wanted. And he wore it proudly, as he always did. Tonight, though, you feel different. You feel that the robe is not simply a piece of clothing, but a symbol of something more, something deeper than the weight of the crown or the titles, or the endless stream of ceremonial appearances. It's an intimate connection between you, the fabric, and the Emperor. The banquet unfolds, as banquets do, with ceremonial elegance and formal gestures. The clink of silverware, the delicate tinkle of cups filled with wine. The courtiers sit in their finely stitched robes, eating, drinking, and whispering amongst themselves. You watch, standing at the edge of the hall, always the observer, never the participant. You catch glimpses of the Emperor as he moves through the crowd, the robe catching the light with every step. It's a thing of beauty, undeniably. The threads shimmer and shift, turning gold into silver, soft and bold in equal measure. He stands taller tonight, not just because of his rank, but because the robe makes him feel like he's part of something greater, something more permanent than the fleeting moments of court life. It's a small victory, a quiet one, but it fills you with a sense of purpose. You are a part of this. You are a part of something that will live on in the whispered stories of the court, passed down through the ages like the robes themselves. As the night stretches on, you find a quiet corner of the hall, a space where the music fades and the light dims. Your mind wanders, and you think about all the robes you've made, the ones that have been worn and passed on, the ones that have never been seen by anyone but you. There's a satisfaction in that, in the quiet artistry that will never be fully appreciated in the moment, but will live on forever. Historians still argue whether the robes made for the Emperor were ever truly his. Some say they were symbols of the empire's greatness, others claim they were nothing more than extravagant displays of power. The truth is, they were all of these things, and none of them. But for you, the creator, the seamstress, the robe is something else entirely. It's a quiet rebellion. A soft shout that will never echo across the centuries, but it will live in your hands, in the folds of silk and gold. And as the banquet winds down and the emperor's robe returns to its place of honor, you find yourself standing in the quiet of the robe room, a soft smile tugging at your lips. You know that you've left your mark. The days following the banquet pass with a sense of calm, as though the very air has settled after the intensity of the emperor's grand appearance. There's a quiet hum in the palace, and you can't help but feel that the robe has done its job. The emperor wore it, and the world has taken notice, at least the world within the walls of the palace. You hear whispers from the courtiers, murmurs in the hallways, about the elegance of the robe and the daring combination of East and West that it represents. But while the robe has found its place in history, you are already thinking about the next task. The world of fashion, of embroidery, is endless, after all. Just when you think you've mastered the art of stitching a perfect pattern, the next challenge presents itself. And the next. And the next. One day, you are summoned once again to the emperor's chambers. You don't know why. You're not surprised, but the sense of anticipation never quite leaves you. Every time you enter his presence, it's as if you're walking into a storm. You can't predict what will happen, but you can feel the power of it in the air. This time, however, there's something different about the emperor's mood. He's standing near the window again, looking out over the courtyard, his robes flowing in the soft breeze. His face is not the stern mask you've become accustomed to, but one that's thoughtful, even slightly amused. You wonder what's running through his mind. "You've done well," he says, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of approval. "Thank you, Your Majesty," you reply, your voice steady, though your heart beats a little faster. "I see that you've been busy," he continues, his gaze sweeping over the intricate designs in the robe room. "I've seen your work on the other garments. The craftsmanship is impressive. But now..." He pauses, and you wait, wondering what he will ask of you next. You've made robes for every season, garments for every occasion, but the emperor never seems to tire of requesting something new, something that will stand out, something that will leave a mark on the world. "No," he continues, "I want something different." You lean forward slightly, intrigued. "What do you have in mind, Your Majesty?" His eyes flicker with a kind of curiosity. "I've been thinking about how our empire is not just about the land, but about what it represents, our people, our history, our power. I want a robe that reflects that. A robe that is both regal and humble, something that speaks to the heart of the empire." It's an odd request, but not surprising. The emperor often asks for garments that do more than just clothe him. They must speak of his authority, his lineage, and his place in history. This, however, is different. This is not about grandeur. This is not about the richness of silk or gold thread. It's about something more subtle, more profound. You find yourself lost in thought, wondering how you could possibly represent the entire empire in one robe. The task feels daunting, but there's a certain excitement in the challenge. Perhaps it's because, for the first time, the emperor is asking for something that doesn't just reflect him as a ruler, but him as a man. The robes he wears have always been a symbol of power, but this request feels different. It feels like he's inviting you into a more intimate understanding of his reign. "You must," the emperor says, "create something that can be worn by any of us, not just me. Something that unites us all." You nod, trying to absorb the weight of his request. You begin to think of what this robe could look like, how it could symbolize the entirety of the empire. But as you do, you realize that this challenge will not be one of luxury. It will be one of balance. The robe must not be too ornate, for that would defy the emperor's message of unity. It must be simple, yet speak volumes about the land it represents. It must tell the story of the people. For the first time, you feel the enormity of your craft. You're not just creating an article of clothing. You're telling a story of an empire, of generations, of the soul of a nation. Every stitch will carry the weight of centuries of history. The emperor watches you carefully, his gaze steady. "I trust you," he says simply. "I know you understand." With that, he leaves you alone in the room with your thoughts, the silence settling around you like a heavy blanket. You stand still for a moment, letting his words wash over you. You've been asked to do something few have been asked to do before. Not just make a robe, but make a legacy. As the days pass and you begin to sketch your ideas, you realize this will be no ordinary garment. This will be a robe that is not just worn, but lived in. It will speak of all the lives that have been woven into the fabric of the empire. It will speak of the peasants who have worked the land, the soldiers who have fought for it, the artisans who have crafted it, and the emperor who rules over it all. The question now is, where to begin? Historians still argue whether the emperor's request was a turning point in his reign. Some say it was an attempt to ground his empire in something more human, more connected to the people. Others think it was a moment of vanity, a final attempt to make himself appear more relatable. The truth, as always, is somewhere in between. But for you, the creator of this new garment, it's more than just a royal request. It's a chance to make something that will transcend the confines of the palace. Something that will stand the test of time. The silence in the room feels thicker now, as though the very walls are waiting for something. The emperor has asked for a robe that speaks to the empire itself, a symbol of unity, humility, and power all woven into a single garment. But as the days slip by, you find yourself caught in the enormity of the task. You think of the land, the vast plains, the mountain ranges, the rivers cutting through the countryside. You think of the people, the farmers, the scholars, the artisans, the soldiers, each carrying the weight of the empire in their own way. But how do you turn such vastness into a single piece of fabric? How do you stitch together a history that stretches back thousands of years, a future that will surely continue long after you're gone? It seems impossible. Still, you cannot avoid the task at hand. You know the emperor's expectations. He trusts you, after all. And with that trust comes a certain kind of responsibility, one that you're determined to meet. It takes you several days of thinking, sketching, and even taking quiet walks through the palace gardens, where the sound of the wind through the trees reminds you of the simpler things, the things that can't be replicated by thread or silk but are just as vital to the fabric of the empire. The garden becomes your refuge during these moments of creative doubt. The flowers bloom, the birds sing their soft songs, and you listen to the rustling leaves, feeling the weight of the task beginning to settle. Perhaps this is where you'll find your inspiration. The very heart of the empire lies not in its cities or its armies, but in the natural world that surrounds it. The seasons change, the earth provides, and the people, like the flowers, bloom in their own time. Slowly, the idea starts to form in your mind, a robe not of excess but of simplicity, a robe that speaks to the resilience of the land and its people. The fabric should be rich, but not overbearing. The colors should be grounded in earth tones, deep greens, warm browns, and the soft cream of rice fields at harvest time. A robe that is at once regal and humble, something that can be worn by anyone who works beneath the emperor's banner, not just the ruler himself. But it's not just the colors you need to think about, it's the texture, the feel of the fabric. The emperor's usual garments were crafted with delicate silks, the kind that gleam in the light, that feel like luxury itself. But this robe must be different. It must be substantial, tactile, a garment that feels real. You imagine the texture of the cloth beneath your fingertips, rough yet warm, inviting but not indulgent. A fabric that can withstand the weight of the world without losing its elegance. You begin to test different materials. You find that the finest wool can be woven into a dense, supple fabric that holds its shape yet remains soft to the touch. You incorporate silk, but only in small amounts, letting the texture remain humble. You use gold thread, but it's subtle, woven into the seams like a glint of sunlight filtering through leaves. The robe must look like it has lived with the people, grown with them, but still retain the dignity of the emperor. As the design begins to take shape, you realize there's one more thing that must be added, a symbolic pattern, a touch of embroidery that tells the story of the empire. You think of the ancient patterns, those from the distant past, the ones that were once used to protect the emperor from harm, to symbolize the strength of the empire. You've seen them on old scrolls, worn by warriors long gone. You decide that this robe will carry those patterns, stitched into the fabric like an invisible shield. There's a particular motif, a simple, delicate vine that represents the connection between the emperor and his people. The vine grows from the base of the robe, winding its way up in an intricate pattern. It's not too bold, not too loud, but it's there, like a quiet promise that the emperor will always remain rooted in the land, his people, and the strength of the empire. Historians still debate the meaning behind the patterns woven into the emperor's robes. Some believe they were purely decorative, created to impress foreign visitors and court dignitaries. Others insist that the designs carry deep, symbolic meanings, meant to remind the emperor of his responsibilities to the land and his people. The truth is likely a combination of both. After all, the robes were never just garments, they were statements. And in your case, they are statements of your own, of your understanding of the empire, of the subtlety required to stitch together something both simple and profound. You work tirelessly, sewing and weaving each thread with care. You want this robe to be perfect, but you also want it to be honest. Honest in its design, honest in its symbolism, and honest in its representation of the empire. Each stitch becomes a meditation, a silent prayer for the empire's future, for its people, for the generations that will wear this robe long after you are gone. As the robe nears completion, you begin to feel a sense of peace. The burden you once felt, the weight of creating something that speaks for an entire empire, has begun to lift. You've created something that feels true. And now you know the emperor will wear it not as a symbol of his own glory, but as a symbol of all that has come before him, and all that will follow. The robe is not just an object. It is a story. It is the quiet history of an empire, stitched together with patience, care, and humility. The day arrives, and the moment you've been waiting for is finally here. The robe is ready. It sits before you, folded carefully, its simple elegance almost glowing in the soft light of the palace workshop. It's as if the garment itself has taken on a life of its own, its patterns woven with such care that they seem to hum with quiet significance. You can't help but run your fingers over the fabric one last time. The texture is everything you hoped for, smooth yet substantial, a delicate balance of humility and grace. The colors blend together like the earth and sky, subtle yet powerful. The vine pattern you worked so hard to perfect snakes through the fabric, its twists and turns like the very lifeblood of the empire itself. It's not loud or ostentatious, but it is undeniably striking. As you prepare to present the robe to the emperor, your thoughts wander to the journey that brought you here. The long hours spent in the dim light of the workshop, the quiet moments of doubt, the flashes of inspiration that guided your hands. You've stitched together more than just fabric, you've stitched together the history and spirit of the empire. It's a weighty thought, but it fills you with a quiet sense of pride. You are escorted to the emperor's chambers, and the guards open the doors with the kind of reverence that you've come to expect. You enter, holding the robe carefully, and find the emperor standing by his window once more. His back is turned to you, but he doesn't need to see you to know you've arrived. "There you are," he says softly, his voice echoing in the stillness of the room. You step forward, presenting the robe to him. The room is quiet as you unfurl the garment, its fabric catching the light in a way that makes it almost shimmer. The emperor turns to face you, his eyes sweeping over the robe. There's no immediate reaction, no excited words of praise. Instead, he simply studies the garment, his gaze soft yet penetrating. You wait, holding your breath, wondering what he will think. His eyes linger on the vine pattern you've stitched into the fabric, and for a moment, you wonder what he sees when he looks at it. Does he see the empire? Does he see the people who have lived and worked under his reign? Does he see the history of those who have come before him? Finally, after what feels like an eternity, the emperor speaks. "It's perfect," he says, his voice steady but laced with something deeper. There's a quiet pride there, but also a sense of something else, something almost reverential. For a moment, you're not sure whether he's speaking about the robe or about the work that went into it, the careful thought, the reflection of the empire's history and future. You wonder if he fully understands the significance of the garment you've created, but then again, perhaps that's not for you to determine. "You've captured the essence of what I asked for," he continues, his tone soft. "A robe for the empire, not just for me." His words settle into the room like a gentle breeze. You can hear the rustle of the fabric as he picks it up, running his hands along its surface. It's a moment of profound connection, the emperor, the robe, the empire. All of it coming together in a single, fleeting moment. He steps closer to the robe, and you watch as he puts it on, his movements slow and deliberate. The robe drapes around him effortlessly, its simplicity somehow making his presence more striking. It's as though the garment doesn't overwhelm him. Instead, it enhances his natural dignity, his quiet power. He looks regal without being ostentatious, humble without being plain. As he stands before you in the completed robe, the emperor looks different. Not just in the way he appears to the outside world, but in the way he carries himself. It's as if the robe has allowed him to shed the layers of grandeur that have defined him for so long. It's as though, for once, he's wearing something that reflects the true nature of his reign. You stand there for a moment, feeling a sense of accomplishment. It's not a grand, victorious feeling, but something quieter, a calm satisfaction in having done something that feels true. The robe is not just a garment, it's a bridge between the emperor and the people, between the past and the future, between the grandeur of the imperial court and the humble spirit of the land. The emperor turns toward you again, his gaze steady. "You've done well," he says simply. "I am proud of you." The words feel weighty, but in a good way. You realize then that this, more than any praise or recognition, is what you've been working toward, the moment when your work is truly seen for what it is, a reflection of the empire itself, a part of something greater. As you leave the emperor's chambers, you feel a strange sense of peace. The robe is now more than just a piece of clothing. It's part of the fabric of history. And you, in your quiet, humble way, have helped stitch it all together. Historians will debate its meaning, of course. They'll argue about the significance of the patterns, the choice of fabric, and whether the emperor's decision to wear such a simple robe was a sign of humility, or a calculated move to appeal to the people. But for you, none of that matters. The robe is done. The work is finished. And in its quiet elegance, it speaks for itself. As you leave the emperor's chambers, your heart feels lighter than it has in weeks. The robe, now a part of history, will no longer be just a collection of fabric. It has become something greater, something eternal. It will be woven into the stories told for generations to come, its simple elegance becoming a symbol of an empire's strength and humility. The emperor himself will wear it with quiet dignity, and that, in its own way, is enough. The next few days pass in a blur. You are still deeply involved in the inner workings of the imperial court, your duties shifting from the robe's creation to the more routine tasks that await your skill. But there's a new sense of purpose in your work now. You have crafted something that transcends the confines of fashion or mere aesthetics. You've touched the heart of the empire, and you know it will be remembered. And yet, in the silence of your workshop, there's a bittersweet feeling that lingers. You can't quite shake the thought that you may never be recognized for what you've done. In a world where the emperor and his court are showered with constant attention, where generals and officials receive all the praise and admiration, the quiet work of those who stitch the empire together remains hidden in the shadows. You, like many others, will remain a behind-the-scenes figure, your name unlikely to ever be etched in the annals of history. But that's all right. As the days go by, you start to realize something important. Perhaps the real significance of your work was never about fame, or accolades, or even recognition. Perhaps it was always about the quiet act of creating, of adding to the tapestry of the empire in your own small way. Still, life at court continues. News of the emperor's new robe spreads quickly, and soon, you find yourself swept into the currents of courtly gossip. The officials, courtiers, and scholars discuss the robe in hushed tones, fascinated by its symbolism and its simplicity. Some whisper that it marks a new era for the empire, a return to the humble roots that once defined the ruling family. Others, of course, see it as a political maneuver, a way for the emperor to appear more connected to his people while maintaining the prestige of his office. In the midst of it all, you hear one story that catches your ear, an offhand comment made by a foreign diplomat who had visited the court and seen the emperor wearing the robe. "The emperor," he had said, "seems more human now. The robe isn't just for him, it's for all of us." His words resonate with you, and for the first time in days, you allow yourself a small smile. Perhaps there's more to this than you realized. Perhaps this robe, this simple creation, has done something far greater than even you intended. Historians will continue to debate the robe's meaning, just as they debate so many aspects of the empire's past. They will wonder whether it was a true act of humility, or simply a shrewd political move. They will write about the emperor's reign, about his robes and his policies, about the battles fought and the treaties signed. They will speak of the grand moments, the triumphs, the victories, the events that shaped the course of history. But there's something about the quiet, subtle nature of the robe that seems to elude their understanding. They will never quite grasp the true essence of what you created, the way it was crafted not just for the emperor, but for the people, too. The way it symbolized the quiet strength of an empire that thrived not on opulence, but on resilience, simplicity, and connection. As the days turn into weeks and the weeks into months, the robe becomes a part of the emperor's daily life. He wears it not just for special occasions, but on routine days, when the weight of the empire is at its heaviest. It is his quiet armor, a reminder of his bond with the land and the people he rules. Over time, it becomes more than just a garment. It becomes a story, passed down through generations. The robe will be described in history books, its simplicity and its power becoming a symbol for future emperors to consider. Some will wonder if they, too, should wear such a robe that reminds them of their duties to their people, a robe that grounds them in the reality of their reign. Historians still argue whether the emperor's decision to wear the robe for such long stretches of time was a deliberate effort to forge a connection with the common people, or whether it was simply a practical choice, born out of necessity. But no one will ever question the significance of the garment in the empire's story. The robe remains as a quiet testament to the enduring power of humility, of simplicity, and of the intricate connection between the ruler and the ruled. As for you, you never sought fame, and you never received it. But the robe has become your legacy, a legacy that will endure long after you have passed. And when the story of the empire is told, your name will not be forgotten, even if it is whispered in the background, like the quiet hum of a loom turning in the distance. For sometimes the quietest of acts are the ones that leave the most lasting impressions. And in the end, that is the true beauty of your work. The years pass, and though your name is never etched into the grand scrolls of history, the robe continues to tell a story, its fabric worn by the emperor, its symbolism slowly seeping into the very culture of the empire. It becomes not just an object, but a symbol of connection, of humility, and of the delicate, often unnoticed work that underpins the glory of a nation. As you look back on your life from the quieter days of your old age, there's a soft sense of satisfaction that settles over you. It's not a loud, triumphant satisfaction, but something far gentler. You can't help but think about the robe every now and then. Perhaps it wasn't just about creating a garment, it was about capturing the essence of an era, of an empire, in a single piece of cloth. And in that way, you may have done something more lasting than any high-ranking official or general ever could. You spend your remaining years crafting simple garments for the people of the empire, robes, tunics, sashes, all imbued with the same quiet artistry that defined your earlier work. The workshops are still bustling with activity, and though your fame may be small, your skills are still respected. The emperor's robes may have been the pinnacle of your career, but they were not the end. You continue your work, day after day, creating the kinds of garments that weave together the fabric of daily life for the people you've always served. Every stitch feels like a tribute to that first robe, the one that defined your legacy. One evening, after a long day of work, you find yourself sitting in the stillness of your quiet workshop. The sun has long since set, and the only light is the soft glow of a lantern beside you. You reach for a needle and thread, your fingers moving automatically as they've done countless times before. The rhythm of the work is soothing, and for a moment, you allow yourself to drift back in time. You think about the emperor, the robe, and everything that has happened since. You think about how far the empire has come and the ways it will continue to change, long after you're gone. And though you may not be remembered in the way grand figures are, you know that in some small way, you've contributed to the story of the world. Historians, of course, will continue to debate the meaning of the robe. They'll wonder whether it marked a shift in the emperor's approach to leadership, or whether it was simply a fleeting fashion choice. But as you sit there, stitching in the quiet of your shop, you know the truth. The robe was never just about politics or symbolism. It was about something deeper, something that can't be measured in terms of wealth or power. It was about the quiet, everyday acts that build and sustain a culture, and the unspoken connection between the ruler and the people. As the years turn to decades, the world outside changes. Empires rise and fall, but the robe remains, a quiet testament to the enduring power of simple things, of quiet acts that ripple through history in ways that no one can truly predict. You leave the world with no grand monuments to your name, no statues in your honor. But that's all right. The robe is enough. It has woven itself into the very fabric of history, and that's more than enough for you. As you grow older, your hands slow, and the sharpness of your sight begins to fade. But even as age begins to claim its toll, there's a certain peace in knowing that you've crafted something that outlasts even time. And when you look at the robe, or any of the simple garments you've made, you know that the world is always moving forward, always changing. But there's a kind of comfort in knowing that some things, the quiet and the humble, endure. And when you finally close your eyes, the last thing you hear is the soft sound of a needle passing through fabric, stitching together a legacy that no one will ever fully understand, but which will, nevertheless, live on forever.